You found us. I'm so glad you did, but I am sorry that you had to. Who are we? I'll tell you what we're not. We're not old, we're not boring, and we're not giving up. So come on into our Widow Circle, where trauma meets humor, and we remind you that you can not only survive, but thrive. This is Every Widow Thing. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on Every Widow Thing. Today's episode is a really good one. I'm super excited. I started listening to Anderson Cooper's new podcast, and it's all about grief. His mom died in 2019. He had to go into her apartment and close it up, basically. And he was shocked at how much grief he was feeling. And at the same time, he finds things from his father who had died in 1978. He found things regarding his brother who had committed suicide at 21. So there was a lot to literally pack and unpack while he was going through his mother's apartment. And so he decided to do this podcast. Now, the episode that really caught my attention was it was the second episode, and it was about being grateful for your grief. And I thought it was a really interesting topic. So I asked the other ladies to listen to that episode so that we could discuss it here on the podcast, because one of the things that I have said early on in my grief and still continue to say is that I want to sit in gratitude. I want to find the blessings in it. But I know that that is not easy for people to do, number one. And for a lot of people, it's not even easy to understand what that even means. How can these terrible things be gifts? So I just wanted to say, like right off the bat, what did you guys think overall about the podcast, about the episode?
It was really good. I listened to it twice.
You did? It made me cry.
Yeah, I cried too.
Stephen Colbert's had a tough row too. I mean, two brothers and a father died in an airplane accident.
Yes.
And the raw vulnerability between the two of them, but also Anderson Cooper's always keeps it pretty together. I mean, he has his own show on CNN, and then he does other things. But so you see him as this kind of news guy, and then on this podcast, I was amazed at that he went there,
bawling his head off.
And so
it was
really
refreshing because it's like two men having this,
and they were both emotional.
Exactly,
yeah.
Two men that could actually go there.
It just showed me what we already know. There's no time limit on grief. I mean, these guys are in their late 50s and they're crying about their fathers who died when they were 10. Mm-hmm. Or also, their brothers who died they were younger. So you can bawl your eyes out 20 years later, 40 years later.
You know what it took me to? Our kids. That's what I thought about when I was listening to it. I thought, what if this is our boys and girls?
Yeah, I did
all
too.
These years later in their
kids.
50s, what will they say is the thing that they remember? Because I asked Ryder that, and he said, I don't remember much. And I'm like, I don't know. I think right now in his mind, because he's so happy and life is good, living his best life. But there are bound to be things that in his later life, when he has his own children, and like our kids have their own children.
Stephen Colbert talks about when he has his first daughter and how that made him think about just the fragility.
And the belt.
The fragility of life. And he talked about his brother's belt.
So Stephen Colbert had this belt. His brother died when he was 10. He had this belt in every house that he lived in. He put it in every closet that he had, but he didn't really even think about it.
And he never wore it.
And he never wore it until one day his own kid, who happens to be named after the brother who died, and it's his belt, needed a belt.
And he asked if he didn't know it was his brother's belt either.
Yeah,
he didn't know the story behind it.
Right. And so it just goes to show, if I want to keep my husband's clothes or take something and take it with me everywhere I go, that's not weird.
It's not weird at all.
Stephen Colbert did it.
And Kira's having an issue with the mic right now.
Wants to go right into her.
My mic is
it's getting into her private.
Hot mic.
Literally hot mic. That's funny. I like the fact that the belt thing came up, because I love the fact that here's another person that keeps, because I had one therapist, the one that I never went back to, she thought it was weird that I kept his clothes. She wanted me to give him to Goodwill. And I was like, I'm so glad now I didn't listen to her.
Yeah.
I listened to my own instinct.
Right.
No one can judge that. You do what works for you.
And I use it as opportunity. So a lot of my kids they've all kind of grabbed T-shirts of Frank's, and the girls will sleep in them, or Thomas can wear them now that he's 18. And
doesn't it make you happy to see them?
And I sometimes will, like, if I see a photo on my phone, whether I'm looking back for something or if something pops up and Frank is in that shirt, I'll just text with the kids. I mean, now we have all this technology where you can just say, like, hey, look, here's your dad in that shirt that you love to sleep in.
That's cool. So fun.
And it just kind of brings him into the present, and it kind of includes him in some way in our daily life. I'm going to text you this.
And it would make Frank smile to see his kid in his shirt, like he's big enough now to wear his clothes.
Yeah, it's fun.
So like I said, the underlying, I think, message or the conversation that they were trying to have was about grappling with this gratitude with grief. And so I wanted to know what you think about that. What was your takeaway from that conversation? Do you believe that you can be grateful for it? Are you grateful for it?
Crickets.
I was really impressed, because I think it's so much easier to go to the dark side, right? It's easier to be sad or angry. And depending on where you are in your journey, or like what people have, recommended for you, whether it's a therapist or, sometimes it's good to go into the dark side and kind of delve into it. I had a delayed kind of grief reaction because of my injuries from the car accident. And so I had one therapist that said to me, this was months later, you just never grieved. You just pushed it down and you never really grieved, and you've got to do it now. You got to do it. You got to get in there. And so sometimes,
especially when you're trying to get your health back, and then you're worried about your children. So it kind of doesn't give you a lot of time to focus on.
I mean, I don't think anybody blamed me for that. I mean, I did what I had to do to move forward. But I really took that and then went into some of those moments where if I got sad about something, I would stop what I was doing and take a minute and just go cry and just have the moment. But what's nice about Stephen Colbert is, like, he's just super positive. He talks a lot about beauty, though, about how beautiful life is, the good and the bad, the painful and the joy.
Well, I sent you guys something this morning. I meditate every morning, and just so people are clear, it isn't like 30 minutes. I have ADD or something, because I can't sit still that long. But sometimes it's only 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but I've made that a practice for a really long time. And there was this one particular devotional that was about asking for God to so that I could see him. I needed to feel lighter. I needed to not feel so heavy. It's the holidays. It's what's happening in my family with my mother, and things changing, and my son going to college. All of it was weighing on me so much. I could just feel like I can't handle this anymore. And listening to that podcast yesterday, that made me feel a little lighter. And I was like, okay, you've got to do the work of finding the good, because it's a lot of work to find good in something that's so painful. And then this morning and all day, I've had the best day. It's awesome. So crazy.
Yeah.
And I think it was part the podcast. So kudos to those two guys, and for Whitney for turning us onto it. But the other was that I felt like I was asking God to please just give me some lightness. I mean, that's the least you can do today. And it worked. I was lighter.
I love what Stephen Colbert said in the conversation, something like, if you're going to be grateful for your life, you have to be grateful for all of it.
Right.
And that means the good, the bad, the trauma, the highs, the lows. And so when I try to look at the gratitude in my trauma, I will go to things like, well, I'm grateful that I loved that deeply. And so now that grief is going to be deep, because that it's equal to the love. Somebody said
it was the actor Andrew, whatever the actor was. Is it Spider-Man?
Yes,
the British guy, Garfield.
Yes, that was so cute.
He said something that the tears that I'm crying are just the not unresolved grief, but
there's nowhere for me to put it.
There's nowhere for me to put it. No one.
Yeah.
no one to tell anymore because they're gone. But
yeah,
it's
I have
still
nowhere
my
to
love.
put it. Yes.
It's still the love.
And so that I'm grateful.
That's cool.
I remember this story. I may have told y'all this story before about the family who lost their kindergartner. And my mom was a teacher, and I remember this story, and this was years and years and years and years and years ago. I had no idea that I would need to draw on it, but this family in the school where my mom taught, they lost their kindergartner. The kindergartner died, and she was talking to me about how the family was handling it. And she said, it's just so incredible to watch because instead of lamenting over all the time they're going to lose, they're sitting in the gratitude of the time that they were given. And
I don't know if I could do that. That is amazing to me.
But that is also a practice. It's a practice, and they must have been doing that before they had the tragedy. And yeah, that's a way where I could find gratitude in the grief. I don't like that he's gone. I hate that I lost him, but I'm grateful that I had him. I'm grateful that I loved him.
We can walk into a room now much more acutely than before and feel people's sad energy.
Yeah, they touched on that.
It's much more profound.
He talked about
the
value of having gone through loss and that you can have compassion for somebody that is going through it. It was kind of the same, like when Gabe's friend died and we had to go see his parents, and Gabe's like, I don't know if I can do this. And I said, you've done the hardest thing you've ever had to do. You can do it. And we walked in the room, and it went as well as could go.
But that has given you or all of us an opportunity to use that grief to help other people who are grieving. That's something to be grateful for.
Yeah, because before Toby died, I wouldn't have known what to say, to any of you.
Right. I even said that, even being a widow, when someone else ended up being a widow, I even thought to myself, I don't know what to say to them. I thought, you're so crazy. Of course you do. But once you've gone, I'm 12 years in, the acuteness of his death is not with me as much anymore. My grief comes from other things that are piled on, not as much about, I guess that's the beauty, is that when you do the grief work, when you do the therapy, when you have friends, when you meet 3 other ladies that have been through what you've been through that can relate to your story and the hard things, that it does get a little bit easier over time. You learn to live with it better.
And another thing that Stephen Colbert said that
Stephen,
I loved.
so
I know.
smart.
Well, we're supposed to be talking about the podcast. I feel like I'm in the book group and I'm the only one that read the book. No, I'm just kidding.
I have notes, dude. I read the book.
No,
I am one of those that goes to book club and doesn't read the book.
Yeah, he says that grief can be, and this is sort of to your point, grief doesn't have to be a cave, and you can visualize grief instead as a tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
So you do have to go through that dark time to come out the other side. And that really resonated with me for some reason, because I think, there's all moments where you feel like you're in a cave. You feel like you're alone. It's dark. It's sad. Maybe you're angry. You can't see the other side. And for me, is visualizing, when I'm in those moments, I just love that analogy of turn the cave into a tunnel. You're going to get through to the other side. And I just loved that. I thought that was so positive and smart,
funny,
helpful for me.
What he used another analogy that I was curious what you guys thought about it. He said his grief was like a beloved tiger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tiger can hurt you, but it's your tiger. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
He's just trying so hard to help everybody understand.
I'm going to stick with the tunnel one.
Okay.
You can have the tiger one. The tunnel one made sense to me.
The tunnel
the
makes
tiger,
sense
I don't
too.
know.
The tunnel means that you'll get through it, but the tiger, you're always going to have that beloved tiger sitting next to you.
I always felt like that represented rage, but maybe that's not what he meant. But for me, a tiger is like rage.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I thought of is the tiger that won't let go, is that rage stays with you on some level.
Can't remember who said it, but he said anger is the armor against how you really feel. You have to go to a very vulnerable place. Anger is kind of the easier emotion.
But it's the most repelling to other people.
It covers up the pain.
Yeah.
That's what I took away from the tiger part, was that it's the rage, and that rage really represents pain, enormous pain that's not been dealt with.
I thought it was interesting how both of their mothers handled their own deaths. So Anderson Cooper is going through his mother's apartment, and she's left little notes.
I love
everywhere.
That was just
When your person dies, you're the only one left to hold on to them. So Anderson Cooper's mom left little notes all around the apartment.
I did too.
Holly, tell us what Stephen's mom did that I thought was so great.
And the reason she did this is so all the siblings would get together. And they went to her house, and
it was in her will that they had to do this,
yes,
right?
Yes. And they drew a number, and then they, could go pick what they wanted. And then they would talk about each item.
I love that.
That's a great tradition. And we've touched on it a little bit outside of the podcast, and I think we'll do an episode on it. But part of what I felt was lacking when Hunter died was I didn't know what to do to honor him or to heal or help the kids. Or in some instances, I know, Holly, you were like, I don't even know how to bring him up in conversation. Not Hunter, Toby.
Hunter gets around, doesn't he?
I was
He
like
had
that
two eyes.
early on
Yeah.
when they were younger. I mean, now I talk about him.
Yeah, I feel like Americans or people, I don't know, a lot of people, there are no traditions in place.
Well, that's why I love the Jewish tradition of sitting in Shiva.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful way to do it. It tells you basically what to do, but it gives you time to honor the dead.
It's just like our society is so, like, people don't talk about death.
Well, that's what I loved about Anderson Cooper said that. He said, I couldn't believe under any circumstance that I would have a podcast that would be discussing this. He said, but he couldn't not do it because of all that was happening around him. And I think having his own children now made him, it changes how you view everything.
Well, it's a universal thing. Every single person on this planet is going to have a loss, even the loss of like a divorce or a job. I mean,
Exactly.
there are all different kinds of grief. Talking about traditions, in the olden days, you dress in black for a long period of time.
They were talking about that too, where like years ago that you would.
People knew you were grieving.
For like a year. Or
Yeah.
What was it called?
Black days? I don't know. Grieving. I have no idea. What is it called? You're in mourning. Is that
Well,
is
now
that the
you
word
wear
you were
black to
looking for?
weddings, which used to be like you did not do that, and now that's common.
And now you don't wear black to funerals.
What did you guys feel about that? Because I feel like I've felt this way at times because my brother passed away, which I haven't really discussed on the podcast yet, 2 years before our accident in which Frank died. But Anderson talks a lot about how he just feels completely alone now that everyone's gone. His whole immediate family is gone. And where do those stories go? What happens to those stories? And just the weight of carrying all of those memories on your own and not really even being able to. I find I've had times where without Frank, I'm sure we all have, I haven't been able to cross-reference. Like,
Right.
remember that time when, Thomas fell and, Thomas will be telling some story about him falling and hurting himself or something when he was younger. And I can't look at Frank and say, I don't remember how that happened.
Right. There's no
What about
verifying
their births?
details.
Think
What
of the
house
births
was
of your
that?
3 children?
Yeah,
Who
nobody
did you
else
talk to
really,
about the births of your children?
Yeah, I didn't have anyone
No
at the
one was
birth
there.
except for him.
Except for
and
him.
I thought that was an interesting piece. And just to segue to sort of ideas that I was looking into for my parents. And I have a friend in Pilates who is doing the exact same thing for her parents. Is getting that one of those Storyworth.
I did it. Yeah.
One of those books where you send it to them and they can write it all down, and then it,
you did
memories
that.
that they have. I guess there are prompts that come every week.
Yes, it's an amazing. I gave it
That's
to
a good
my mom,
idea.
my in-laws. I gave
doing
it
it.
to a couple of friends, and they've given it to their parents. Yeah, you either write your own question, and it's a year process. So every week they get a question,
I've never heard of this.
and and then they have a week to answer it.
Yeah.
And then the next
they
question
email
comes.
it?
Yes, they email it to them, and you can go in and actually. This is just Storyworth. I don't know how it is
Yeah, and my
other
friend
people, but-
Carmen is doing a different one. So there's a few different ones if you want to, with different styles, if you want to shop around.
Yeah, but I think that's a great way, and even do it for yourself. Anyway,
Taking advantage of all this technology that we have now. Because back then, Colbert was talking about how he didn't even have any recordings of, I think, was it his brother's voice?
yeah, it was his brother.
And then he found an
Oh,
old
yeah.
tape recorder. He had recorded him and his brother talking on this tape. Fascinating.
I will keep voicemails now. This is kind of morbid, but of like if my mom leaves me a voicemail or my in-laws or even my children, I save.
I have way too many.
I do too, but I'm like so afraid I don't want to lose their voice.
I agree
So
with
I
you.
keep
You're trying to leave us a voicemail and it's full. That's why.
Well,
You
I have
can
all those
download
videos. I'm sure all of you have iPhone video too,
Yes.
but I was listening. I took Ryder into the living room one day because I'd finally gotten the DVD fixed. It was such a poignant thing to he had never seen them because Ryder's now almost 19 and never seen any of them when he was little. And his dad obviously died 12 years ago. So it's been a long time. I haven't heard his voice in a long time. So I had it put in and he came into the room and I said, well, what do you think about that? And he said, wow, we sound sort of similar, but it was just a weird feeling because I had so much emotion attached to it and his voice. But I think it's a smart thing like what Anderson's and Stephen Colbert's mothers did. I mean, what a beautiful way to help them in their memories of the things that they could possibly be aware of.
Yeah. I really encourage everyone. Have y'all listened to any of the other episodes?
I haven't.
I haven't either, but I'm going to because I think it's really interesting to hear other people's stories. Obviously, that's one reason why we're doing this
And like
podcast.
Holly, I like that it was men. I like that
loved that it
men
was
were
men,
vulnerable and were sharing their
crying
feelings.
men.
It's unusual.
talking about their grief and sharing some enlightening views that I hadn't really thought of before. So it's called Anderson Cooper. All There Is the name of the podcast.
okay.
And yeah, the episode that we're talking about is Grateful for Grief. All right. Well, thank you for listening in. Head on over to Instagram, shoot us a little text, let us know what you're thinking, what you need from us. And on a future episode, we are going to be sharing some widow confessions, things that maybe you thought or did or wanted to say, feelings that you may have had that you just didn't feel comfortable owning up to. We want to hear about it. Don't worry, we won't share your names, but we do want to share your confessions to let everyone know that anything is normal. You can share those confessions by DMing us on Instagram or sending us an email to everywidowthing@gmail.com. Thanks so much. We look forward to hearing from you. All right, we'll see you soon. Bye.